And welcome back to the Sports Fix, and I'm joined by the Statman and the Flowman to talk about a very, very important topic, one that it's an age-old chestnut. It just doesn't seem to go away, this one, and that is umpires. Now, I know you blokes have been at seeing and calling some games of recent times, and you've said some things to me about some of the umpires out there were probably there when the game first started more than a century ago. So what is it? And there is a struggle to find umpires. So what is the state of play at the moment, Jace, with umpires? We need them, but what is going on?
Well, there's quite a few factors at play here. So players have always played in country areas long beyond when perhaps they should retire to keep their clubs afloat, whether it be in the reserves or whatnot. But It's becoming more and more vital that these guys at 45, 50, 55 years of age are still lacing the boots up, going out and propping up their teams, their clubs, because obviously it's harder and harder to find people to actually play the game. So as a result of that, once upon a time, a player who might have played 250, 300 A-grade games for his club may have retired and grabbed the whistle, taken that up. Well, that's not happening as much anymore because guys are being forced to continue to play. So that's an issue depleting umpire ranks as well. I think the other thing that depletes umpire ranks, and always has, is the level of abuse that's delivered towards umpires. It's still there, particularly at country level. It does still happen from time to time. I'd like to think we're better now than perhaps we have been in the past, but I think now people are so much more sensitive to it that people just say, well, I'll pick the whistle up, and I'm not prepared to go out there and cop that sort of abuse for 2.5 hours. There's better things I could be doing with my day. Plus, wages have risen exponentially over the last 25 to 30 years. If you have a look at what an umpire was paid back in the 80s compared to what an umpire is paid now, I bet you that hasn't kept up with CPI. In fact, I can guarantee it hasn't. So maybe we need to look at, first of all, incentivising country umpires to do some more umpiring. We need to have a look at how we structure up competitions to make sure that Joe Bloggs, who's 55 years of age and has played 600 games for his club, doesn't have to feel like he's got to pull the boots on every week to keep his club afloat and might actually do something else around the club. And we have to make umpiring an attractive proposition. In other words, if you're out there and you're watching the country footy, leave the umpires alone, whether they make bad blues or not.
And the boundary umpires too, and the goal umpires, all of them.
Some will, in general, make the odd mistake from time to time. They're not AFL umpires. They're just out there doing their best to try and keep the game afloat. So if we can start putting all of those things together, maybe we might get an increase in umpires. But one of those three factors falls down, nothing's going to change.
Hello, man.
I think we've got a big problem from AFL downwards, that at an AFL level where you've got paid umpires, well paid, professionally, they fly here and there and so forth. A lot of the younger ones, even in the country comps, will then try out in the, say, state league competitions like the VFL, maybe the SANFL and so on. But the exchange of good umpires back into the country is not happening. So I think from a AFL point of view, there's a lot of money in the game. We know that there is. We know there's even a lot of money in the country game because a lot of players in country football are getting paid really well. But the guys that are running around blowing the whistle in country football clearly are not on any of the remuneration packages that the footballers are getting. And clearly the clubs are raising a lot of money with the crop and so forth being sown so that they can win a premiership and recruit a couple of great players and be the next big thing and try and win their competition. But the umpiring really hasn't changed the numbers. The guys that are running around are getting older and older. They'd love to see some younger blokes come through, some guys that have played the game for many years that are, as you've said, Jason, guys that have played that 400, 300, 250 games to come out and blow the whistle. A lot of them are already doing that. But why doesn't the AFL say, let's get to grassroots umpiring at a higher standard? Let's actually remunerate the guys in senior football, the A-grade games. Let's get umpires from out of the city competitions, the SANFL, to come up and one umpire perhaps each week to take a game in each competition to increase the training for the umpires that are actually running around, the second umpire or the third umpire, so they get to see a really good umpire in action, a fit guy that's running between the half-back and the half-back of each end, the centre-half forward, centre-half-back. It gets to the contests and gets to the right positions so that we can start to train our guys out in the country to be better umpires. Yes, there are got talent identification programs for umpires, and some of the kids do end up going down to town and do, in fact, get involved at a higher level in AFL. But I don't think we're seeing the AFL put money back down into umpiring at the grassroots level. I think that we've got to pay these umpires, we've got to get guys to blow the whistle, to know that when they blow the whistle, that club has a payment system, that club doesn't have to worry about where the money's coming from. Are the bar takings going to be there for that particular payment to the umpire? That the AFL says, we are going to increase the amount of umpires at grassroots level. We're going to do training camps, the whole sorts of things, get these guys trained at a local level, get them involved in this game. Because if we don't, then ultimately you can't run around and play this game of football like we're seeing in a lot of reserve competition. We've got the field umpires are now bouncing the ball when the ball goes out of bounds. It's in the Horsham District competition, it's in the Mallee competition in South Australia. I think that's a travesty of our game, that we now have got to a point where the 17-year-old kids, 16-year-olds don't want to throw the ball in the senior competition that afternoon. That, to me, says a lot about where this has got to. We need to change that, otherwise we don't have a country game, and therefore we don't have a grassroots game, and therefore in the AFL we then don't have an AFL game because there won't be enough umpires to umpire.
Is it just the AFL coming down to this, or is it even at the clubs? Is it kind of a two-way thing, that the clubs need to do more, the AFL needs to, everyone needs to do more, and as a result the umpiring is just getting put into a too-hard basket?
Well, by and large, everyone needs to do more. There's no doubt about that. But clubs are so busy running clubs, country clubs, on volunteer, through volunteers, that it's hard yakka. And umpiring is just another thing to the list. So, look, there's no question that the AFL at the moment is a taker from country football, not a giver. It takes an enormous amount of players out of country football every year at draft time. I think at last count, we're trying to count down at the moment and try and get a list of how many country players from our flow area playing AFL football, and I think at last count that list has got 40 names on it.
I think it's going to be more like 80 to 90
Yeah, I think by the
players.
time we get through that, it will be about that. So over the AFL lists, I mean, that's an enormous number of people. Enormous number of players.
Thank you for the new word, Shakespeare will be happy, but enormous.
Enormous number of players out of country areas that are going on to play AFL football, and that's fine. But if the AFL want that to continue, then they've got to provide, for all parts of the game, umpiring included, a bit of a blueprint as to how they're going to fund that to make that happen. Because at the moment, crops are funding that, not the AFL. And the AFL need to have a real good look at it. And this is the problem when you get the game run by the premier competition in the land. I've always spooked on about this. I don't like it. I don't like the way football is administered in this country. The AFL are a competition. They're not the governing body of the sport, or they shouldn't be. At the moment, they're both, and I don't like that.
Agree. The other thing I'd like to throw in here is, can you imagine if Jace the Statman and Wayne the Flowman, instead of us going out commentating games, we went out and actually we were called on to umpire them. Now, that would be really interesting to see how you and I would go out there, because I know that at the Giants versus the Crows game on the weekend, I screamed at the top of my lungs at the umpires because they were absolutely woeful. They weren't great. But isn't this part of the problem, that you and I perhaps should be us, the guys that are talking about the game, we're all complaining about the umpiring, but we need more guys to actually go out and become umpires, and maybe the buck's got to stop with each one of us.
Well, maybe part of the problem is people like yourself who just won't leave the umpires alone, Flowman. They're doing the best thing they can, and here you are from your ivory tower, throwing abuse, hurling abuse at the poor fellows.
Yeah, you were sitting there. Your wife was walking out of the ground. She was so embarrassed with the way you were commenting on the umpires.
No, but they're professionals. You're allowed to hang it on those guys, the AFL guys, the ones that get paid well. But down at grassroots level, we have to be a little bit forgiving of our friends that get out there and blow the whistle on a weekend.
Can you imagine you and I running around? It'd be like the couple of guys running around.
It wouldn't be much running from this point of view.
Yeah, I reckon you'd be calling it from 80 metres, you would.
I'd be
You'd be calling it from the bar.
next to Brucey blowing the whistle from the box.
We might need Brucey's cameras actually, so we can call it from the camera van.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, folks. If you've got a game of football that you want Jace the Statman and Wayne the Flowman to umpire, then let us know here at Flow. They are more than willing to don on the tight wide shorts You can just imagine it.
Goodness me. Be able to play a drive-in movie on the back of mine.
Indeed. But that's the challenge. Get in touch with us. Flow FM Australia on Facebook or news@flowfm.com.au is the email address. I'd love to see it. I really would. I'd love to see the two of you out there umpiring and being encouraged by all of us on the sidelines too.
We could do a fundraiser and raise some money for country football and for umpires in general. Maybe that's something we should look at, because honestly, this worried me when I was out watching the game, calling the game. It did appear to me that we are at a crisis point. When I see the photos from all around the competitions and I see the guys running around the umpires, and I can see that these are the older men of our leagues that are still out there. The younger guys are not being encouraged to come through and take up the mantle. We need to get the AFL to become more serious about those younger guys becoming umpires.
We certainly do. Final word, Jace?
I think I'm going to go and look for some very, very, very large white shorts.
Tight, large white shorts. Enormous.
Enormous.
And I'm going to
might sew a couple together.
And I'm going to get a new knee brace.
That's it, folks. If you want them to umpire the game, get in touch with us at Flow FM via our Facebook page or at news@flowfm.com.au. We've got more on the Sports Fix coming up.